Hi and welcome everyone to this rapid fire with Dr. Anton. Welcome, Dr. Anton.
Perfect. Nice to see you again.
So we have a bunch of questions for you. I'll start off with the first one. Um do you have any interesting stories from all of these years of work and extensive research around threat actor attribution?
So this is the question. The answer would go in a very different direction. I think that this is one of the topics where every few months I switched my opinion on this, from attribution
Okay.
matters to attribution doesn't matter to attribution matters to attribution doesn't matter. So I have a very famous colleague who has this big campaign and big belief that attribution matters, and he has great examples where it does, and he has great examples how it matters to real CISOs and not just to governments. And he convinces me, and I agree with him, and I see examples of where attribution matters. And when I look at companies that fight ransomware, where they kind of fight, they essentially deal with badness, and ultimately for them, they want the badness to stop. They never really care who does it, why. They just want it to stop. And
Hmm.
I start to be unconvinced that attribution matters. And I start to think that attribution really does not matter, and you just need to stop the badness for these clients. So I think that, and then the either that person or other people convince me that attribution matters. I talk to a few Mandiant people, of course, and they convince me that attribution matters, and I
Matters.
become convinced that it matters, and I see examples where it matters, and then in about a month or two, I go back to unconvinced, and I start seeing examples where attribution becomes this elitist top 1% thing when you really care, but most people don't. I don't know. At this point, I'm just a bad person to answer it because I am torn about whether it matters for most clients. I certainly see clients for whom it matters, definitely, but most of them tend to concentrate on a very well funded, very well resourced organizations. Below
Hmm.
that, I am of two minds. I am convinced and I'm unconvinced.
Oh, okay. But thanks for sharing that. So I was going through your profile and I figured that you were, of course, in Gartner, and then you would have had a lot of fun days with the acronyms. I think you had also, for our listeners here, you're also credited with inventing the term EDR. So I'm sure that would be one of your favorite terms, but I wanted to know what's the story behind EDR and what is one of your other favorite acronyms and why?
Sure. So this brings us back to 2013 when I was looking at certain tools types at Gartner that investigated activities around the endpoint, and they were not focused on fighting malware. So they're clearly not antivirus tools. I looked at things like Mandiant MIR and a few others, and I realized that it's probably a new tool category. And I felt like I need to poll more Gartner analysts for the ideas. And I've done a lot of like little spreadsheets and little votes, and ultimately, I coined a term ETDR for endpoint threat detection and response. The reason I
Okay.
wanted a T is because I wanted to shove this as far away from malware as possible.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I was afraid, very presciently as it turns out, that people would assume that EDR is just what antivirus does. And I wanted to
Yeah.
say it's endpoint threat, not malware, because people assume that if it's on the endpoint, it's antivirus. So I kind of went with ETDR, and even some vendors adopted it. But ultimately, in 2013, Gartner had this very well fact backed aversion to four letter acronyms. Yes, we had CASB. Yes, we had other things that are four letters, but people thought four letters is too much. And so a lot of colleagues convinced me to kind of drop the T. And this is where the acronym, I think within a year, pretty much everybody started saying EDR and not ETDR. I've seen I think, couple of RSAs later, some vendors still had ETDR in their booths, but ultimately EDR won. And but the T was there for a year hanging, and then people convinced me that the T is really, you don't need the T. But then funny enough, in another 2 years, some people started saying that EDR is a next gen antivirus. So it's almost like my original here that I should stick it into the acronym so they don't assume it's anti-malware kind of manifested. But ultimately, many years have passed, and then EDR did to a large extent converged with some anti-malware features. So today, if you look at leading EDR vendors, they also have traditional anti-malware. So that's the story. I think that my favorite acronym, I mean, I like EDR. I tried to use NDR for network detection response. I can't claim credit for it. and I absolutely with a passion hate XDR. So this is if you
This is a
want to
revelation.
yeah, if you want to find my most favorite acronym, that's probably EDR. But if you want to have my least favorite acronym, that would be XDR. And there is another blog which is called Anton and the Great XDR Debate Part 1. Yes, literally, that's the blog name.
Oh, okay.
Where I kind of try to say, basically psychoanalyze my intense hatred for the word XDR and why I hate it so much.
Yeah, that's funny. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so you are the security solution. You are looking into security solution strategy at Google Cloud. What would be your mantra for the mid-sized or large-sized organizations when it comes to their security strategy?
So I'm going to give a thought-provoking but probably unrealistic answer. And I think it applies better to smaller and mediums and less to large ones, but I'll give it anyway. So sometimes in the podcast, I humorously say that if you wave a magic wand and the entire stack of your IT in your company would become endpoint as a Chromebook and the servers is software as a service applications, basically Chromebooks and SaaS. If you somehow magically turn your company to Chromebooks and SaaS, probably 97% of the entire security problems would vanish for you. You would never see them. They would be absolutely, utterly, completely gone. You can still make mistakes with SaaS. You can have identity mistakes. You can still have people attack your software as a service application. But if you somehow magically turn your company into Chromebooks and SaaS and nothing else, my impression, and it's not based on any kind of analytical risk assessment, it's kind of more of a gut feel and experience, that your security would be simpler, more effective, more robust, very beautiful, very clean, very easily understood, but also completely unrealistic. Because yes, if you are a small medium bank started in 1940s, you probably have mainframes, you probably have Solaris systems, you probably have other stuff, and there's no magic wand that you can wave and say Chromebooks and SaaS, everything. But I do see some startups that run at Chromebooks and SaaS. And for these startups, security is very simple. It's simple, effective, cheap, it works. Again, the caveat is not that there is a kind of a secret weakness. The secret weakness is you cannot get there from some starting points. If your starting point is mainframes in 1940s or 1970s, whatever, it's not clear how you would ever be in cloud native world with Chromebooks and SaaS. And by the way, maybe the third addition to this, if you are developing something that it would be all modern cloud native dev, CI/CD, and then it becomes more complex. But ultimately, on the business side, if it's Chromebooks and SaaS, security is kind of mostly solved.
All right. Okay, the next one is one of my favorites. I saw you are, of course, you're a doctor in physics. And so, what is your favorite area in physics and why? And maybe because the area might be a little more complex, if you could simplify it for the listeners.
Of course. So my PhD is in quantum physics, and quantum physics is kind of a broad area. I dealt with elementary particle physics, a little bit of nuclear physics, but as a theorist, I've never done any experiments. So the interesting bit about this is that to me, quantum physics as a field have learned me to embrace uncertainty. And I think it helps a lot with my security work because, of course, in our beloved domain of cyber, we have a lot of uncertainty. And to me, the quantum physics mindset is kind of helpful. And it's not only because I can read the post-quantum encryption papers. I still don't understand them, by the way, so don't ask me about that one. But to me, quantum physics is better as a background compared to maybe some other fields because it trained me to see uncertainty and to see probabilities everywhere and maybe see risk as well.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the last one. So this is just I wanted to give personal shout out. I've been a listener for a long time for your podcast, so Everybody who's listening, please check out Dr. Anton's podcast. It's Cloud Security Podcast by, of course, Dr. Anton and also Timothy Peacock and from Google. There are a lot of exciting episodes. There are a lot of relevant topics which I could definitely relate to in various walks of security, but of course in your own areas as well. So I wanted to know, what are your favorite? Can you call out maybe a few favorite episodes that people who are checking out can also check out?
So I would just basically, while you were asking, I was running to the stats page for the podcast. I sort of know my our top five, but I'm just going to go still check it again. So if I look at the most favorite episodes, to me, most favorite episodes are things that describe how Google solved something incredibly complicated in security. So, for example, the number one episode, excluding the oldest three are sometimes presented to more people as the first episode, so I don't really count them. So if I exclude the oldest three, my most popular episode, that also happens to be my favorite, by the way, is episode 75, How We Scale Detection and Response at Google, Automation's Metrics Toil. So this episode is a glimpse of some things that are done at Google in the area of security. And it's a glimpse at things that are, how should I put it without projecting hubris, that are done so incredibly well that people just don't find it believable. And so this is in some of the other episodes that rank high is something about how we do something very hard with security, and we do it kind of brilliantly well. Of course, it sounds very, it does sound like hubris. I realize it, but I'm just looking at data, and the data points at these episodes to be favorites. There's a similar one on vulnerability management, and there's one from my boss, from Phil Venables, where we talk about why cloud is more secure than on-premise and why it will become more secure. I'll give you a top three to the notes, but the top one is the one about how Google does DNR, detection and response.
Cool. Thanks a lot for sharing that and answering all the questions today and the rapid fire. And thanks for joining us today, Dr. Anton.
Perfect. Thanks for inviting me. I'll add one more episode, and again, looking forward to seeing it come on air.
Looking forward to more such episodes with you. And thanks everyone for joining us today.